Good to see you. Tonight we've got 4chan posts that are deeply twisted. Threads that shouldn't be this messed up. These are the stories. Like the video, subscribe, turn the volume up, and we're in. The envelope had been sitting in the same drawer since Reagan's second term, and I'd have left it there if the humidity hadn't warped the cabinet enough to jam it shut. This was September 2017, right after Harvey brushed us, but before Nate. The office was on Chartres, second floor above a place that used to be a shoe repair, and is now, I think, another daiquiri bar. I'd been hired 6 months earlier to sort out 30 years of Mr. Beaulieu's paper, since he'd retired and his son wanted to sell the practice clean. Slow, dusty work. The place smelled like old carpet, and the kind of mildew you can't ever really kill down here. A lot of what I sorted was tax filings from clients already in the cemetery. The drawer was in the back room, the one with the busted AC vent. I'd been fighting it for 10 minutes with a screwdriver when it finally popped, and half the contents slid onto the floor. Wills, mostly. Copies of copies. And one manila envelope, sealed with brown tape gone brittle. No case number, no client folder attached. On the front, in handwriting that leaned so hard to the right, it looked like the letters were falling. To be opened by the addressee on or after September 14th, 2017. Not before. Under that, a name. Just a first name and a last initial, and an address in Metairie. I sat there on the floor for a while, with the envelope on my lap, I want to be honest. My first thought wasn't spooky. My first thought was that somebody was owed money and had been owed it for 3 decades, and here I was on September 12th, holding it 2 days before the deadline. That's the kind of thing that gets you in the paper for a nice reason. I logged into the intake ledgers. Beaulieu had a habit of noting every visit, even the ones who walked out without hiring him. I found the entry, October 3rd, 1987. The client's name was listed as Ambrose, no surname, and where the signature block should have been there was a small, careful cross. Not scratched, drawn, 2 clean strokes with a fountain pen. I went back through the ledger for October 87 twice. Every other client that month had a folder, a fee marked paid, a phone number in the margin. Ambrose had none of that, just the line and the cross at the end. The notary of record was Beaulieu himself. He died in 1994, aneurysm. I couldn't ask him what a client with no last name and no signature was doing in his book. The next morning, I drove out to Metairie. Veterans was still a mess from the storm, palm fronds all over the median. The addressee, a man named Curtis, lived in one of those low brick ranches with a chain link fence and a little concrete Mary in the yard. He answered the door in a Saints t-shirt and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. 60-something, gray at the temples, wary the way anyone is when a stranger with a briefcase knocks on their door. I told him who I was. I told him I had something addressed to him from 1987, that I didn't know what it was, and that per the envelope I couldn't open it, only he could. I said I could leave it and go. He looked at me for a long second. Then he said, 1987. Yes, sir. I was 29 in 1987. Okay, come in then. I don't want to do this on the porch. His kitchen smelled like coffee and cigarettes, though there was no ashtray anywhere. Sunlight through the blinds put bars across the linoleum. He sat down across from me, and I slid the envelope over. He turned it a few times. He touched the handwriting. He said, I don't know this hand, almost to himself. Then he opened it. I watched his face while he read. I didn't want to. It felt intrusive, but I had to know if this was a joke or a real thing. He read the first page slowly, the way you read a contract. By the second page, he wasn't slow anymore. He was flipping. He'd stop, go back, read a paragraph again. His jaw was moving, like he was chewing on the inside of his cheek. On page 4, his hand shook a little, and he set the page down flat before picking it back up. The pages were typed, numbered, 6 or 7 of them. He read all of them without a word. Then he stacked them square, tapped the edges on the wood, and slid them back into the envelope. He set his hands flat on the table. Who wrote this? He said. Not a question the way you or I would say it. Flat. Like he already knew I didn't know. I told him the truth. I told him the notary was Beaulieu, and that Beaulieu had been dead 23 years. I told him the client had signed with a cross. I told him the name in the book was Ambrose, and that there was no folder, no address for that client. I told him I'd looked. He nodded like none of that surprised him. What was in it? I said. I shouldn't have asked. I knew I shouldn't have asked while I was asking. He was quiet for a while. He looked at the little window over the sink. Then he said, It's a list of everything I've done since I was 29. Every job, 2 houses, my kids' names, my wife, my ex-wife, the year I lost her. Small things too. There's a paragraph in there about a dog I had in 2002. His name and how he died. That dog didn't have papers. He was a stray I picked up off Airline Highway. He paused. There's a line about a fight I got into in a parking lot in Baton Rouge in 1993. I never told anybody about that fight. Not my wife, not my brother, nobody. He tapped the envelope once with 2 fingers, and it's dated October 3rd, 1987. I was in Houston that week. I didn't even know this office existed. I asked if there was anything at the end, a prediction, a warning. He shook his head. It stops at last month, he said. It stops at the storm. It says the power was out for 2 days and I ate cold jambalaya out of a Tupperware. That was Tuesday. We sat there. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere down the block, a lawnmower started and stopped and started again. Then Curtis stood up. He walked the envelope over to me and set it in my hand and closed my fingers around it. Take it back, he said. Put it wherever you found it, or burn it. I don't care which. I started to say something about needing his signature for the file, and he shook his head. I'd like you not to contact me again, he said. His voice wasn't angry. It was tired, the way people sound when they've already decided. Whatever this is, I don't want a copy. I don't want a phone call. If you find another one with my name on it, I don't want to hear about it, please. I said, okay. He walked me to the door. On the step, he stopped me with a hand on my elbow, gentle, and said, "Can I ask you one thing?" I said, sure. He said, "The mark, the cross, in the book. What did it look like to you?" I thought about it. Careful, I said. Like somebody who couldn't write, but had practiced that one shape. He nodded to himself. He said, "Thank you." He closed the door. I drove back to Chartres with the envelope on the passenger seat. I did not burn it. I put it in the drawer it came from, and I taped a note to the front that said, "Do not file." I finished out my contract in November. The practice sold in January. I don't know what the new owner did with the back room. I moved to Mobile the next year. I still get down to New Orleans sometimes for the food. I have never once driven out to Metairie. The route was one I'd flown maybe 200 times by then. Bethel out to a clinic in a village on the Kuskokwim, medication drop, RTB, January 14th, 2022. I remember the date because it was my shift lead's birthday, and we were supposed to do cake in the break room when I got back. I ran ground control for a small outfit that did medical logistics for villages you couldn't reach by road in winter. The drone was a fixed-wing thing, about the size of a small kayak, twin-boom tail, cold weather package. We called ours Bravo because we had 3, and the other 2 had already been named by the guy who bought them. Bravo was mine most days. Weather that morning was cold but clean. 28 below on the ground when I launched, no wind to speak of, sky the color of dirty milk. I remember the coffee in my mug going lukewarm faster than usual. The trailer we worked out of had a bad seal on the door, and you could always tell how cold it was outside by how quick your drink died. I sent Bravo up at 0912. Payload was insulin and 2 other things I can't remember now. Standard 80-minute flight out, drop, 80 back, minus whatever wind did to it. Autopilot handles the boring parts. I'm mostly there to watch telemetry, talk to the clinic on the other end, and take manual if something weird happens, which almost never does. About 40 minutes in, I noticed the heading was drifting. Not much. 2 degrees south of the corridor, then 3. The screen has this little magenta line for planned path and a white line for actual. They were separating. I checked wind, checked GPS, everything looked fine. Then Bravo banked harder, and I saw the obstacle avoidance flag light up in the corner of the interface. That system is trained for a couple of things. Other aircraft. Terrain if the map's off. Big animals sometimes, when it's low. Moose have set it off before. But at cruise altitude, out over the tundra, it basically never triggers. I've had it flagged maybe 4 times in 2 years, and every one of those was a returning bird strike prediction that turned out to be nothing. I pulled up the camera feed. Bravo's nose cam is not great. It's built for a general picture of the landing zone, not for detail. Fisheye, low frame rate, a little bit of a blue cast in cold. What I saw first was just a smear of dark on white, about 100 yards ahead and below. Then Bravo did its little corrective loop, came around, and gave me a cleaner angle. It was a man, standing in the snow, on foot, middle of the tundra. Nothing around him, no cabin, no snow machine, no tracks I could see from that height coming in or going out. Just him. I said out loud, "What the hell?" Nobody was in the trailer with me, just something you say. I brought Bravo lower. That's a judgment call. Technically I'm supposed to log a diversion, but I wanted to see. At 200 feet I could make him out clearly. He wasn't in gear. That's the part I keep coming back to. He was wearing a jacket, the kind you'd wear to walk to your car in the lower 48 in November. Dark, zipped up, no hood, no mask, no goggles. Jeans, boots, but not proper boots, the kind that lace to the ankle. At 28 below with the wind chill, it was closer to 40 below in real terms. A person dressed like that shouldn't have been conscious. That's not me being dramatic. That's what the training material says. Exposed skin freezes in under 10 minutes at those temps. He'd been standing there long enough for the drone to see him from a mile out. He was looking up, not searching. Not turning his head, just looking straight up at the sky in the exact spot Bravo was. I circled him, wide, lazy orbit, maybe 300 feet up, and he tracked me. He turned in place, slow, like the second hand of a watch, face tipped back. I could see the shape of him, but not much of his features on that camera, just the pale oval of a face pointed at the lens. I called it into my shift lead. Her name I won't say, but she was the one who was supposed to have cake that day. I said, "I've got a person on the ground at these coordinates. No vehicle, no shelter. Doesn't look right." She said, "Alive?" I said, "Standing up." There was a pause on her end. Then she said, "Standing how?" I didn't know what to say to that. Just standing, feet apart, arms at his sides. She told me to hold position and she'd call troopers and search and rescue. I asked if I should drop the med payload as a marker, and she said, "No, keep it. They might need us to relay if a helo gets vectored in." So I just orbited. For about 11 minutes I watched this man watch my drone. He didn't wave, he didn't try to signal, he didn't move to walk toward anything. He just tracked. Once, and I'm not sure about this because the frame rate is what it is, but once I thought he opened his mouth, not to shout, just opened it like he was tasting the air, then closed it. I kept talking to him, even though he couldn't hear me. "Buddy, sit down, get low, get out of the wind." The trailer felt very small around me. I could hear the heater cycling. I could hear my own breathing on the headset mic. At some point around minute 9, the sun came out from behind whatever thin cloud had been washing it out, and for maybe 15 seconds, the light on the snow went so bright the camera crushed everything to white. When it came back, he was in the same spot, same posture, same face turned up. Search and rescue got a helo out of Bethel about 40 minutes after my initial call. I gave them Bravo's coordinates and stayed on station until they had a visual. When their spotter came over the radio, he said in a very flat voice, "Confirmed one individual, upright, adult male." Then a pause. Then, "He's still standing." Bravo was down to reserve fuel by then. I had to break orbit and bring her home. I remember watching the shape of him shrink on my screen and thinking he was going to be gone by the time the helo actually landed. Just gone. That the tundra would keep him. He wasn't. They got him, loaded him up. He was alive. Severe frostbite. Fingers, ears, part of his nose, one foot bad enough that they weren't sure at first. Core temp low enough that the ER guys in Anchorage told my boss later they didn't understand how he had a pulse. He couldn't talk. Not from trauma, just his face wasn't working right. It was days before he could form words. When he did talk, he told them he'd been walking from his village to the next one over to see somebody. Family, I think. He said he'd left in the morning and gotten turned around when the light was flat. The two villages are about 40 kilometers apart in a straight line. He'd been on foot, in that jacket, in -30. The math on how long I'd watched him, plus how long it took the helo to get there, plus however long he'd been out there before Bravo ever showed up, none of it works. The doctors said it out loud in the report. They wrote that his survival was not consistent with the exposure timeline. That's the phrase. Not consistent. I flew that corridor maybe 100 more times before I quit the job that fall. I never saw anything on it again, but every time the avoidance flag lit up, even for a bird, my hand would go to the manual stick before my brain caught up. I still don't know what he was doing looking up. The call came in on a Tuesday around 11, and by 2 I was on a dirt road southeast of Deming with a state trooper riding shotgun who hadn't said a word in 20 miles. Ranch hand had been running fence line and his dog wouldn't leave a spot alone. He dug down maybe 6 inches with the toe of his boot and hit what he thought was a root. It wasn't a root. He called the sheriff called the state, and the state called me. I've been the one they call for this kind of thing, in the southern part of New Mexico, for going on 9 years. July out there is brutal. It was 104 when we parked, and the wind came off the flats already hot, so it didn't cool you when it hit your skin, it just moved the heat around. My water tasted like the inside of the plastic jug. The trooper finally spoke to hand me a radio. "You want the tarp up before you start?" I said yes, because I always say yes. The site was maybe 40 yards off the fence, in a shallow wash, where runoff had thinned the topsoil. That's usually how they get found. Wind and water do the work eventually. Someone hides a person out here thinking the desert takes things and forgets, but the desert doesn't forget. It just moves slow. I did what I always do. Grid, photos, tape. Put down my kneeling pad because I've got bad knees now from a decade of this, and I started brushing with a whisk broom, working from the highest point of the exposure outward. First thing you usually see is a cranium or a long bone shaft, whichever ended up closest to surface. Here it was a parietal, sun-bleached on the exposed side, still that deep tea color on the buried side. Adult. Male. I could tell by the brow ridge before I'd cleared the orbits. He'd been down a long time. The bone had that dry, chalky feel you get when the organics are mostly gone, root intrusion in a few places, fine white hairs going right through the diploe. I'd have staked my license on 20 years, give or take 5. I called it in, one individual, likely male adult, extended time in situ. Then I got quiet and kept working. Here's the thing about my job. You get used to a lot. You get used to the smell when it's fresh, and you get used to the silence when it isn't. You develop a working blankness that lets you brush dirt off a jaw without thinking about the mouth that used to be there. You put it down when you go home. But sometimes something breaks through. I cleared past the skull and started on the upper body, expecting the usual. Most of what I pull out of the ground out there was dumped. That's the word. Dumped. You see it in the position. Arms pinned wrong, torso twisted, one leg under the other. Bodies don't fall into neat shapes when someone is trying to be quick. This one was different. His right hand was tucked under his cheek, palm flat, fingers curled, the way you fold your hand when you're about to fall asleep on a couch. His left arm lay along his side, relaxed. The knees were drawn up, not fetal, just bent the way a person bends them lying on their side in bed. The vertebrae still held the line of his spine in a soft curve, which meant whoever put him in the ground had arranged him and packed the soil in gently enough that he stayed that way while the soft tissue did what soft tissue does. Someone had tucked this man in. I sat back on my heels. The trooper was 30 feet off, smoking, not looking at me. I could hear the tarp snapping in the wind. I remember thinking very clearly, this is not a dump, this is a burial. There is a difference, and it matters. I went back to work slower. That's when I saw the flower. It was on the frontal bone, sitting just above where the eyebrows would have been. A small dried thing, maybe an inch across, 5 or 6 petals, some kind of desert aster. I couldn't have told you the species without a book, and it was wrong. 20 years in that soil, in that heat, with the runoff and rot and insect load, you don't get a preserved flower on a skull. You get a stain, if you're lucky. You get nothing, usually. This flower still had color in the center. The petals were dry but not powdered. When I lifted it with tweezers into a paper bag, it moved as one piece. It hadn't been down there with him. It had been placed there recently. Days, not decades. I stopped brushing. I stood up and I looked around. Really looked. There is nothing out there. That's what people don't understand about that stretch of country. You can turn a full circle and see 15 miles in every direction and count maybe 2 features. A mesa, a windmill, no houses, no tracks that weren't ours coming in. Nearest paved road 8 miles back, nearest town 22. Somebody had been here, recently. On foot or by a route we hadn't found, and they had walked up to a patch of dirt that from 3 feet away looked like every other patch of dirt in that wash, and they had left a flower on a man's forehead through 6 inches of soil. I called the trooper over. I showed him the pose. I showed him the bag with the flower. He looked at me for a long time. "You sure about the age?" I said. "The bones? Yes. The flower? No." He walked back to his vehicle and got on his radio. We processed the rest of the site by the book. He was intact more or less. No obvious trauma to skull or ribs, though the lab would look closer. No personal effects except a belt buckle, plain, and the metal grommets from what had been boots. No wallet, no ring. Whoever put him down had left him without ID, but not without care. And to me, those 2 things sitting next to each other were worse than anything I'd pulled out of the ground that year. We got him bagged and boxed by sundown. I drove back to Las Cruces with the windows down because the AC in the truck couldn't keep up and because I wanted the noise. The lab came back in about 3 weeks. Bones, 40 to 50 years old at time of death. In the ground, 18 to 22 years. That lined up. The flower was a common desert species. Plant tissue estimated at 4 to 7 days post-picking. Somebody had cut it that week. Dental gave us the ID faster than I expected. Reported missing out of a small town in eastern Oregon in the summer of 2001. 46 at the time. No wife, no kids on record, parents both gone before he vanished. One sister still alive, living in Michigan. According to the file, she had no idea why he'd have been in New Mexico and hadn't heard from him in the year before he disappeared. She'd never set foot in our state. Nobody in his file had any connection to that piece of desert. The sheriff put a game camera on the site. 2, actually, on the likely approaches. For the first month, nothing. Coyotes, pronghorn, wind. Then in September, a card came back with a frame of a person, from behind, walking away at what the timestamp said was 4:12 in the morning. Long sleeves, hat, no face. The image was grainy enough they couldn't even call the build with confidence. There was a fresh flower on the ground the next morning where the skull had been. They moved the cameras, added a third. Whoever it was stopped coming for a while, then started again in a different spot near the wash, leaving flowers on the bare dirt where he used to be. They're still trying. Last I heard, they had nothing. I think about him more than I should. Not the man, him I understand. Bones tell you what they tell you and then you let them rest. I think about the other one, the one who knew where he was for 20 years and never said a word, who is still, as far as I know, walking out into that wash in the dark with something in their hand. The intercom at the back dock buzzed at 2:11 in the morning, and that was already wrong. We took overnight deliveries, hospice cases, hospital transfers, sometimes a funeral home dropping off before they closed out, but every one of them called ahead. You called the on-duty tech, you gave a name, you gave a case number. Nobody just showed up. I was in the back office finishing a cup of coffee gone cold hours ago, watching the little space heater tick. The place I worked was on the south end of Memphis, off a stretch of Elvis Presley Boulevard, where the streetlights got thin and the businesses were mostly tire shops and check cashing places. January had been ugly that year. Freezing rain most of the week, the kind that turned the parking lot into a sheet of glass. I pulled up the camera on my monitor, black GMC Yukon, older model, backed halfway up to the loading dock. 3 men outside it. One of them was pressing the intercom again. "Yeah, hold on," I said into the mic. "You got a case number for me?" The guy at the intercom looked up at the camera. Maybe 40, clean-shaven, wearing a navy pea coat that looked expensive. He gave the camera a small, tight smile. "We spoke with somebody earlier," he said, "about a private cremation, cash arrangement. Nobody had spoken to anybody. I would have known. I was the only one on that shift. I don't have anything in the log for tonight," I told him. "Who did you talk to?" There was a pause, long enough that I noticed. Then he said, "I don't remember the name. Older gentleman. Told us to come around back and ask for whoever was on." That was the first thing that put a knot in my stomach. My boss was in his late 30s, and the only older guy at the facility was the director, and the director didn't take calls after 5. I told him to hold on. I muted the intercom, sat there for a second, and then did what I probably should not have done, which was buzz the dock open and walk out to meet them. The cold hit me right through my scrubs. The wind coming off the parking lot smelled like wet asphalt, and, faintly, that sweet chemical smell that always lived around the building. All 3 of them were standing at the back of the SUV. The one in the pea coat did the talking. The other 2 hung back. One was younger, mid-20s, in a black hoodie and jeans, hands stuffed in his pockets. The third was older, heavier, wearing a members-only jacket that looked like it had been pulled out of a closet in a hurry. He kept looking at his watch. He kept looking at it, not glancing, turning his wrist and reading it like he was timing something. "So here's the situation," the peacoat guy said. He had the calm, reasonable voice of somebody who sold insurance. "We have a family member who passed. Complicated situation. The family wants him handled tonight, discreetly. We understand there's usually paperwork. We'll get all of that to you first thing in the morning. Death certificate, transit permit, whole thing. We just need this done tonight. Sir, I can't accept a body without documentation. That's not a policy thing. That's the state of Tennessee. I'd lose my license, my boss would lose his, the facility would get shut down." He nodded like he'd expected that. Then he reached into the inside pocket of the peacoat and pulled out an envelope. Thick. He held it out at chest height, not offering it, just showing me it existed. $6,000, he said. "In hand, right now, plus the standard fee in the morning when we bring the paperwork." I did not take the envelope. The younger guy in the hoodie shifted his weight. I noticed his sneakers were wet up past the laces, like he'd been standing in something before he got in the truck. The older guy looked at his watch again. "How long does it take?" the older one said. First thing he'd said. His voice was rougher, local accent, or close to it. "How long does what take?" "The whole thing, start to finish." I told him it depended. A full cycle was 2 to 3 hours in the retort, then cool down, then processing. Start to finish, closer to 4. "We need it done before 6, the peacoat guy said, very evenly. "Sunrise, whatever's easiest to remember. It's important to the family that he be at rest before morning." There is no religion I have ever heard of that requires a cremation to be completed before dawn on a Tuesday in January. Not one. And I have handled bodies for every kind of family you can think of. I want to be clear about something. My brain was still trying to find a normal explanation. Maybe they were embarrassed. Maybe the guy had died in a way the family didn't want to explain, an overdose or worse, and they were trying to skip the mess. Families do try to shortcut things when they're ashamed, but then the older one, the one with the watch, said something to the younger one in the hoodie, quietly, under his breath, and I only caught it because he turned his head slightly and the wind carried it toward me. He said, "We're not gonna make it. Not, we won't make it in time. Not, we should go somewhere else." Just those 5 words, low and flat, said to a person who already knew what they meant. The younger one didn't react. He kept his hands in his pockets and looked at the ground. I told them, in the calmest voice I could manage, that I was sorry, but I couldn't take the body. I told them there were facilities in Mississippi that might have different hours, and they could try there in the morning, but I had to log every intake by state ID number, and there was no way around it. I made it sound like a computer thing, like it was out of my hands. The peacoat guy stared at me for maybe 3 seconds. "All right," he said. "Sorry to bother you." They got back in the Yukon fast. Not running, but fast. The rear compartment was already closed, and I never got a look at what was in it. I watched them pull out of the lot and turn north, back toward the boulevard, and the second the headlights were out of sight, I ran inside, pulled up the dock camera, and paused it on the plate. Tennessee tag. I wrote it down on the back of a receipt. I called the non-emergency line first, because I wasn't sure what I was reporting. I told the dispatcher what happened, what they'd said, the watch thing, the "we're not gonna make it" thing. She put me through to somebody else. That person took the plate. Detective called me back around 3:40. He wanted to know if I could come in and give a statement in the morning. I asked if they'd found the truck. He said yes. Traffic stop on I-55, heading down toward the state line. He wouldn't say much else, just that the men were in custody, there was a body in the back, and no, it was not a natural death. The rest I got from the news over the next couple weeks. The man in the back had been dead less than 12 hours. It was going to be a medical examiner case, no matter where he ended up. If our retort had been running by 3, there would have been nothing left to examine by the time anyone thought to look. I still work nights. I still take deliveries, but I read every ID twice now, and I do not open the dock until I have a case number in the log. Not for anybody. That's where the story releases you and fades back into the static. I appreciate you staying loyal through every single moment. What narrative's going to follow you into tomorrow? Tell me below. There's an endless stream of material, all of it unsettling. Don't forget tonight. See you in the next one.